You are recording.
All right. Good morning and welcome to the SDW OneCon virtual session. This week we are sharing success stories with educators who are implementing and utilizing our learning management system here in the district, which is Blackboard. Today our guest is Kayla Elwood. Kayla is a first-year teacher at West High School, and the reason that I reached out to Kayla to share today is specifically because she's early on in her journey with BB9. But even just in this 1 year of teaching and application, she's grown so much and developed so much and accomplished so much. And I think it's important to highlight those stories for everyone, especially for those who haven't necessarily jumped in and are kind of waiting to jump in and aren't sure really where to start. But I think Kayla's got a lot of great information to share. Not only is she using this resource, but she's also become a tech leader in her building, and her colleagues look to her for help, assistance, tips, tricks. So we feel very lucky to have you here today, Kayla. And so without any further ado, welcome, Kayla, and the presentation is yours to go ahead with.
All right, thank you. So I guess I'll just start with sharing my screen real quick. All right. So if you asked me to share at the beginning of the year anything about Blackboard, I knew nothing. But I've been taking the TDP courses, so I'm in Blackboard 103 at this point, and those have been super, super helpful. So I'm going to talk about how I'm using it for virtual learning first. So what I have for my students is every Friday I post a new little blurb of important information on our welcome page, and then a video. And I've learned how to use YouTube to upload my videos and then embed them into Blackboard so that the students don't have to click a link and leave Blackboard. Because I know once they leave Blackboard, they don't always want to come back. And then underneath, I always put a little to-do list, because some of them I know don't want to watch my whole video, and so that way they can get the quick notes. So that's something I've been putting out every Friday for the following week, just so that way if they want to plan over the weekend to start any work, they can. And then it always tells them to jump into the units tab. And I use the standard template that I was given at the beginning of the year. And then in here I have a folder for every single unit. And what one teacher told me was to think of Blackboard as a filing cabinet. And that has really helped with my organization on here, because I also polled my students at the beginning of virtual learning, what am I doing that's working for you? What am I doing that's not? And so a lot of my organization was actually all of their ideas. So if I jump into one of my units, what I've been doing is putting different weeks, and if we had a funny schedule where we didn't have a Monday schedule in week 2, so I put that on there so that all my students knew what days were you supposed to be working on. And then inside my weeks, because it's a filing cabinet, now I have it separated into days. So instead of just having topics listed out, I have specifically, this is what you're doing on day 1, day 2, day 3. And if they jump into these are learning modules, which are something I just learned about and I think are super awesome, because the students can click into there, and then it's got an arrow key, and so they have to go in order. And so first here they're taking notes, and then if they click next, they've got a little bit of a task, and then I have this what to turn in tab I've been giving them, where I have a description of what they're going to turn in. But then I personally am not a fan of grading in Blackboard, because I can't sort my students via hour. And my gradebook in Infinite Campus is set up by hour, so it's a lot easier for me that way. So what I do is I have a link to Google Classroom where they submit their work, because I'm able to grade it by hour. But also I've been putting in, if we have calculations in physics, we do a lot. This I've been embedding in Google Forms so that they can get a quick shot of if they got the answers correct or not. So just so they get immediate feedback, but I'm still able to go back and look at their work later. So that's kind of how I've been using it for virtual learning. Yeah, so I guess that's how I've got this set up for virtual learning, and each lesson looks a little bit different, but there's usually a video and then a task and then a link to Google Classroom to go turn it in. And then something that I'm planning to continue doing after like virtual learning is I found some online simulations. I've been using the Phet simulations all year, which are amazing for science. And I found out that you can embed them straight into Blackboard, which is really exciting. I have an example of that in here. Sorry, gotta remember where I put it. Yep, so I found out that you can embed the Phet simulation straight into Blackboard, which I thought was super cool because again, if I send my students out on a link, they don't always want to come back to Blackboard, which is the hub of where all of our information is. So I find it is better. The more I can keep them there, the better it works out for us. So that's what I have.
Okay, I really liked first of all a couple of the things, and you're not even a plant at all, but I liked that you said you were using our standard district kind of template, so that kind of organization piece is still there. Kayla, a couple of questions that I had for you, and I'm wondering, like, can you talk about how the setup of this has made things more efficient for your students? Can you talk a little bit about how putting everything and creating that, like you just said, that hub of resources for your students helps them to not only in the virtual environment, but also in the face-to-face environment, stay on task and know what their focus is for the lessons and for the week?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing is sometimes if I send them out to a simulation out on the internet, a lot of those have ads and things which are distracting to students and get them off task that way. Otherwise, like if they leave Blackboard, a lot of them just don't want to log back in. And so that's kind of a struggle. And so having it where they don't actually leave Blackboard at all is a lot more efficient for them getting their work done. Also, I mentioned that like at the beginning of virtual learning, I had my students give me feedback. And so I'm just going to show you what it looked like for the first week. I didn't have it separated by days. I didn't have the schedule. I just had like, this is your topic. This is another topic. And I told them like, this topic's going to take you 2 days. And students didn't really know where to stop. And they were like, why did you give us so much work for 1 day? And I was like, because it was supposed to be 2 days. And so having it separated by days, I know my students really appreciate.
Yeah, and I think I don't speak Spanish, but it looks that you have it in both English and Spanish in each one of your sections that you put on here as well.
Yes, I try. So I use Google Translate, not the best, but it's better than nothing because I have one student who speaks very, very little English, and then I have a couple others who have better English, but they're still Spanish is their first language. And so I try to help them out that way. So.
My next question that I have for you, and I know this might seem like, you know, I should already know this question, but can you just talk a little bit about how having this platform and being able as the teacher to kind of work with a goal in mind and work backwards to build out the resources for your students? Can you talk to or speak to how that has helped you as a teacher kind of grow your craft?
I guess I don't understand the question. Sorry.
So like, I know like we usually typically like as teachers, and I remember when I was in the classroom, I would like be planning like, and I would have all my plans for the week. But then like it was like a folder that I kept somewhere. And then when I moved on to the next unit, I kind of like jumped out of there and I never looked at that other unit really until I was getting ready to teach it again for the next year. But we didn't have a learning management system and we didn't have the tools available for us to be able to like create kind of like a year at a glance kind of and put all of your resources and all of your lessons and all of those things kind of in that one place. So for me, it was always like, okay, I'm done with this unit. Now I save it in that folder on my desktop and I'll come back to it next year when I'm gearing up to plan. Kind of for you helps for you to plan your year out and your lessons out really, and your week by week kind of learning targets and that. So how has it helped you really to organize your class and to kind of become more efficient at that planning piece?
So one thing that it's really helped with is if like a student is absent, they can go back and find like the content that we worked through. And so I'm not constantly like rummaging through trying to find like what they're missing. I can tell them, you know, go to Blackboard and you'll be able to find it. That's something I've also I don't use the Google Calendar or the Blackboard calendar just because of the block scheduling. It's doesn't make sense. And so in course overview, I have a calendar and my students can just go back and see like if they were absent, what they missed, and if there's work on Blackboard that goes with it. One thing I kind of started doing towards the end is like, where are you going to find some of the resources? And so that's been very helpful. Also, I've been able to kind of like link things together better for students where I feel like when since this is my first year, I don't have another year of teaching to compare it to, but like when I was in high school, similar to what you were saying, like my teacher would teach a unit and then we would move on and we wouldn't really come back to that. Whereas now it's a lot easier. I can tell my students if they're struggling with a concept that carries through, I can say, why don't you go back and look at some of our readings that were in that unit, and they have it all right here. So even if they don't have a paper copy anymore, they still have a digital copy. And so that's been very helpful.
Definitely. I like how you have it set up. It's very clean. It's very clean looking. I like that you've got your kind of week at a glance, and I like how you've got that all color coded in there. It's really nice to see. And I think as a student, it would be really cool to come in here and be like, okay, what do I have for this week? What do I need? How can I organize my time? Just like you were saying, and those scaffolds that you've built in are really efficient with that piece. One other thing that is it's still related to BB9 because, as you said, it's like a piece that you're focusing on and having your students come back to. But I was wondering if, and it's a wondering if you'd be willing to talk about what we were talking about when we first logged in here, and how you're finishing up the year with your students.
Sure. So I'm finishing up the year with my students, having them work on a project where either it's a scavenger hunt, they're going out and finding examples of the different physics phenomenon we studied all year. So basically, they're doing velocity, so go find an object with velocity. Acceleration, go find an object with acceleration. Forces, find an object that has different forces and explain those. Free falls is a part of projectiles, so we cover that separately in class, but once we've talked about projectiles, they understand that free fall is also a projectile, and so they're going to talk about an object like that. And so I just picked like a little blurb from each unit, and so having them have all of these units is going to be very helpful for that, that they can go back and see what we worked on in each unit, because some of them, we have binders in our classroom, and some of them, their binders got left behind, and so they're still locked up in my classroom and no one can get to them. So this way they can still get that information that we were using when we learned those things. And so they're going to be going out and finding or taking videos of these different objects and then explaining them, putting it into a creative presentation.
Very cool. So I like how you're able to tie that back in. And so your students are still using Blackboard as that launch pad, coming back there, looking at, reviewing if I don't exactly remember what this means, those key kind of learning topics, and then using that to apply to go out into the real world. I think that's an awesome application of, our learning management system married with our creative tools, all while engaging your students. And I think that that's so much what we're striving for here in this virtual environment. Brian, Wendy, do you guys have any other questions or areas that you'd like Kayla to touch on? Anybody else who's on the call? We've got several people in here. Have any questions for Kayla?
Kayla, I had a quick question. You had mentioned that you had asked students for some feedback, and based on that, made some adaptations in the class as well to make it more comfortable for them. I had an interesting thought on your putting the content out on Friday. Was that a conscious choice for them to have that over than waiting to launch on a Monday?
So I started doing that a couple weeks ago. That was about halfway through. And my thought was I had some students who were doing their work on the weekends. And so that meant they were doing it after it was due. And so I decided if I post it on Friday, now if they want to do it on the weekend, they can, but now they're doing it ahead of time. And so instead of falling behind, they're kind of getting a little bit ahead, which I feel more comfortable with. So that was why I made that decision.
Have you looked at any of the reporting tools in Blackboard to find out how many interactions you get from students on the weekend?
I have not, but I do get like WebEx messages on the weekend, and that's how I kind of determined that.
I knew they were in there.
Yeah, and another like awesome plant there, Kayla. I was like, when you were showing your screen and you had your WebEx schedule there, I was like, yes, she's got that learning management tool, and there's her communication tool right there, and setting up. Could you put that back up one more time?
So what I just have here
little...
is I had a rubric for students of like, this is acceptable use of using WebEx so that we don't get a lot of noise in our physics check, because I want it to be for physics.
Yeah.
So that's what this is. But then also, let me jump into one of my topics. So in, let's see which one. This one, okay. So after we finished like a topic, so kinetic energy was a 2-day topic. So they started it the last day of week 1 and they finished it the first day of week 2. And after they worked through the learning module at the end, I had kinetic energy live session. And so these were the times when they could pop in to their hours WebEx team, and then we would ask any questions. I showed off the answer key. I went through some more examples if they wanted. So that's how I shared that out as well. And I also put that as an announcement, so it was something they see when they log into Blackboard before they even click on any classes.
Yeah, so like I love how you're kind of incorporating all of those tools, and you're incorporating both the asynchronous and the synchronous pieces here, because you are, creating the asynchronous tools, like creating it ahead of time, giving it to your students ahead of time so they can work and manage while, when they have time to work and manage the, the course level there. But then you're also giving them those times where you're coming together synchronously, ask questions, create more examples. And I think that's a really smart way to kind of give your students different ways to engage with the content, knowing that in this virtual environment, we can't always be together and we can't always do things on, our timeline, because we've got all these kids doing, what works for them right now. So thank you for sharing that. That was really awesome. Brian, any questions you might have?
Yeah, Kayla, I'm curious. So you're first-year teacher in the district. I'm guessing if you're like every other first-year teacher, you're always looking for what is it I'm supposed to teach? When do I teach it? Like, just curious, have you had the opportunity to bring in anything from other people's courses, other colleagues into your Blackboard course? Have you had the benefit of that yet?
So a lot of the simulation activities that I have students do with Phet actually came from Miss Hanson. So I just kind of adapted them to fit into my Blackboard course.
Okay. Yeah, because what's super interesting, I mean, you got up to speed really quickly. How long do you think it took you to really hit your stride with development in Blackboard and feel comfortable with it?
So at the beginning of the year, I had nothing in there. And so I told my students, I was like, hey, we have this, but right now there's nothing there, so don't bother. And then I started taking like the TDP courses, and after I took Blackboard 101, I felt a lot more comfortable like putting content in there. And so it was kind of like a grab and get place where students could log in and they could download something and then take it off. And so that was I probably stayed there for about like 3 months-ish, give or take. And then I took the Blackboard 102 course at the start of virtual learning, and that kind of really launched my understanding of Blackboard a lot more.
Yeah, yesterday we had Mitch Propson, so he's been teaching 4 years in the district, and you can see, I think you were in there yesterday actually, like you can see how much his growth has happened over those years. It is just an ongoing try it, add some things. This doesn't happen overnight, but it really is quite remarkable to see what you've been able to build in just 1 year. And then if I think about like next year, a new teacher coming in who might teach the same thing from a different build, like you now have the ability to share some of those resources you've built over to them. And that's really what makes Blackboard a powerful tool. So thanks for doing this for students and for showing us how it's done as a new teacher coming into the district.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Kayla, anything else that you'd like to share?
I don't think so.
All right. Well,
one thing I would add in there, Kristen, too, as you think about this, we're talking about that growth process. And I think it's important to know that nothing you've ever done in Blackboard is like wasted time. And you're not going to have to scrap everything and start all over. So Kayla, even though you kind of took a gear shift from, hey, here's my unit to I'm doing dailies because my students just need, you can move around those resources. You can break them up and restructure it. If you decided, you know, something like Mitch was talking about yesterday with, hey, I'm going to do some adaptive release on it. It's just a new add-on and it's not something where you have to redesign the wheel. So all work that's done can carry you forward in that process. And I think that's really important as we get started.
Yeah, that's something there's like a move feature that I've been using, specifically on with my like weekly videos. And so if I turn this off, so I'm able to edit and I can click on the arrow and I can choose to move it. I have a folder at the bottom where I just put my like archived videos. So the students can always see the videos and they don't like disappear, but it's not extra noise on our homepage. So that is something that's really cool that I learned about.
Nice.
I'm just wondering, did you use Blackboard previously at all as a student or any learning management system?
I did not use Blackboard. In high school, I used Google Classroom, and then in college, we had Direct to Learn, and then transitioning to Canvas my senior year of college, and then when I was student teaching at Arrowhead, they used Canvas.
Okay, so you've had some LMS experience before, at least.
Yes.
Yeah, because to be honest with you, like your design decisions and how you're designing those courses really like they speak to me as if you've done this before, but I know you haven't built in Blackboard before. So for you to have some examples, those look like lessons you've brought with you in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Definitely. Well, we are about at 11:25. If anybody else has any questions, please feel free to hit Kayla up right now. We'll hang out here for a little bit yet. And other than that, I hope that you enjoyed listening to Kayla talk about her journey with Blackboard. She's doing some incredible things. And like I said, this is the specific reason why I reached out to Kayla was because she is in her first year. And she did start from scratch and started building. And to see the growth that she's accomplished in just under a year here in the district in creating her Blackboard courses, I think has been quite extraordinary. And as she continues to build, I think it just keeps getting better and better. And I'm excited to see where you'll take it next, because I can just see like the little wheels turning. And, you know, even questions that you were asking Mitch yesterday, and looking at what he was sharing too, and how we can, you know, take those pieces as we continue to hear from others and how they're leveraging this resource, but taking those pieces and incorporating them into our own courses, and how that learning from one another is so valuable. So I'm super grateful to you, Kayla. I love seeing teachers' courses. I can create courses, but I don't often have students, and to see how that looks and feels and how you organize it with the lens of how am I delivering this to students, I think is that piece that sometimes I feel like I don't get to see that side of things all the time. So thank you so much for sharing and for the insights that you have. And thank you for being one of our teachers who are advocating for the use of this tool, because I think, you know, we know how important it is, and we know how critical it is to get our learning resources into a platform that is easy for our students to navigate. And when we hear from people like you, I think it reinforces that. So thank you. Okay. I don't think we have any other questions popping up. So Wendy, if you want to end the recording.